This summer, in the world of tennis, a name showed up on a list. On any normal day, nobody would have blinked. It's the most familiar name this sport has had for 3 years running. And yet this time, the simple fact that the name was there, that became the story. World number 3, Carlos Alcaraz. His name appeared on the entry list for the 2026 US Open. Here's the problem. This is a player who hasn't hit a single competitive ball since April. And to understand why one name on a list set off this much noise, you have to go back to how high he was standing right before he disappeared. A player completes the career Grand Slam inside a single season, and then, in that very same season, skips 2 majors entirely. Let's start with just how strange that is. In January of 2026, Alcaraz lifted the Australian Open and completed the career Grand Slam. He was 22 years old, the youngest man ever to do it. Then he backed it up, winning again in Doha. Through the opening months of the year, he wasn't just good. He was the reference point the entire tour was measured against. There was one quiet warning sign. On the clay of Monte Carlo, he ran into Jannik Sinner in the final and lost. At the time, it looked like nothing more than one great player edging another on a given day. And then, in April, in Barcelona, he disappeared. That Monte Carlo final would turn out to be the last time, for months, that anyone saw the fully healthy version of him. The Barcelona Open, a first-round match against Otto Virtanen. He won the match, but he hurt his right wrist doing it. The diagnosis was a severe tenosynovitis, an inflammation of the tendon sheath in the very wrist that generates that ferocious forehand. From there, the dominoes fell. First, he withdrew from the Canadian Open. Then came the one that stunned people. He pulled out of Roland Garros, a title he was defending. And then Wimbledon, too. When he stepped away from the grass season, the message from his camp came down to this. The recovery was moving in the right direction, but his body simply wasn't ready to compete. So he had no choice but to give up the grass swing, Queens and Wimbledon included, 2 events that mean a great deal to him. He'd keep working to come back as soon as he could. And what looked, at first, like a short setback only deepened. Weeks became a month. A month became 2. The best young player on the planet had, in the middle of his season, simply gone missing, and nobody could say for certain when he'd be back. This is where the story gets its real weight, because in the space he left behind, the landscape of the tour shifted fast. Roland Garros, the very title Alcaraz was supposed to defend, went to Alexander Zverev instead. And you have to understand what that meant for Zverev. For years, he'd carried one of the heaviest labels in the sport, the best player never to win a major. 3 times he'd reached a Grand Slam final. 3 times he'd walked away empty-handed. In Paris, with the draw cracked open, he finally tore that label off. And there was a twist inside it. Even Sinner went out early at that tournament in an upset, and Zverev drove straight through the opening. Then Wimbledon. Jannik Sinner beat that same Zverev in the final and defended his title. It was Sinner's 5th career major. Add one more marker. In total weeks spent as world number 1, Sinner climbed into the all-time top 10, passing legends of the game. So here's the tally. In the months Alcaraz was gone, his 2 rivals each seized the biggest prize of their careers. One claimed a first major he'd been chasing for years. The other claimed a piece of history. The door opened, and they walked through it. And that's what makes this absence bigger than one injured player. For the last 2 years, this era of tennis has been a 2-man story. Sinner and Alcaraz, trading number 1, trading major finals, pushing each other to a level nobody else could reach. When you watched one lift a trophy, the other was almost always the man he had to beat to do it. So when one half of that rivalry goes dark for 4 months, it isn't just a name missing from a draw. It's the balance of the whole era tilting. Sinner kept winning, but the question hanging over every trophy was the same one. How much of this holds up when the other guy comes back? That question is exactly what the US Open is now set up to answer. So where does that leave Alcaraz right now? The clues are scattered in pieces, and they don't all point the same way. Clue 1. In recently released training footage, he was handling the ball with real caution, gently, carefully. Some watched that and wondered aloud whether a return, even this year, was guaranteed. Clue 2 points the other way, and it's the strongest one yet. By mid-July, multiple Spanish outlets reported that his medical team had declared the wrist completely healed and that he was back to full-intensity training. The target for his comeback, the Cincinnati Open. The one caveat, after 4 months away, is that match sharpness may take longer to return than the wrist itself. Clue 3. And this one crosses over from another sport entirely. Alcaraz was in the stands at the 2026 FIFA World Cup final, the night Spain beat Argentina to win it. Cameras found him in the crowd, and there, just days after his camp had called the wrist fully healed. On his wrist, there was a guard. Now, one former world number one, Andy Roddick, offered a simpler read, that the guard may have been nothing more than a way to avoid shaking hundreds of hands that night. But a healed wrist and a brace in the very same frame. A sign that he's fully recovered, or a sign that he's still being careful. That, right there, is the real question mark hanging over this comeback. Now, back to that list from the very beginning. Alcaraz is on the U.S. Open entry list. And before that, he registered for the Cincinnati Open, running from the 13th to the 23rd of August. So the name on the entry list isn't, I'm rushing straight into New York. It's closer to a plan. Test the wrist in Cincinnati first, then the U.S. Open itself, which begins its main draw on August the 30th. And here's why New York, of all places, raises the stakes. Alcaraz isn't just entering. He's the defending champion. And the way he won it last year is the part people forget. Through the entire 2025 U.S. Open, until the final, he didn't drop a single set. Not one. Round after round, gone in straight sets. In the semifinals, he ran into Novak Djokovic, 24 majors, one of the greatest to ever hold a racket, and beat him without dropping a set either. Only in the final, against Sinner, did he lose a set at all before closing it out to take the title. That was his second U.S. Open crown, after his first back in 2022. So this is the stage he's walking back onto, a stage where, the last time we saw him, he was close to untouchable. Which is why the odds still refuse to write him off. As of mid-July, the Sportsbook Bet US had Sinner as the clear favorite, with Alcaraz second, ahead of the rest of the field. This for a player who spent 4 months healing a wrist. Of course, he won't have the stage to himself. Remember Djokovic, the man he beat in that semifinal. 24 majors, and yet he hasn't won one since the 2023 U.S. Open. New York is the exact place he's trying to climb back to the summit. So this U.S. Open entry list, on the surface, it's just a row of names. But underneath, it's the point where 4 separate stories collide on one court. Sinner, guarding the throne and the records. Zverev, riding the afterglow of the first major he waited years for. Djokovic, chasing back a crown. And the defending champion whose very return is still a question mark, Alcaraz. Which leaves us with a single question. Is a name on that list a promise of a comeback or a gamble? Can a wrist that's rested for 4 months survive best of 5 on the sport's biggest stage? In front of rivals who only got sharper while he was away, can he still be the Alcaraz who tore through this same tournament without dropping a set? So what do you think? Does he defend his crown in New York, or does this summer end with someone else's name on it? Drop your prediction in the comments, and tell me which of these for you'd put your money on.